Hey everybody, how you doing? Thank you so much for tuning in to this Soul to Sisterhood interview with me. I have Elizabeth D. We call her Elizabeth D in our book because we've got another Elizabeth. And so remember, I was like, how do you want to be referred to? You want your full last name, just the last initial? And she was like, you're like, I think Elizabeth D works. So this is Elizabeth D, and I'm Jamie coming to you. We're going to have our interview here, just sharing some beautiful wisdom, some really potent wisdom that comes forth from this beautiful lady, this very smart, beautiful, what else can I say about you? Capable, talented, compassionate, loving lady. And she is one of the 38 goddesses featured in our 36 chapters in our Soul to Sisterhood book. She's also got a beautiful oracle card for our Soul to Sisterhood oracle card deck. And I usually start these interviews out saying some nice things about each woman because I feel so blessed to have these amazing goddesses in my life. And I was thinking about this morning, and I remember the first time that we met, having a conversation in the sort of family room where both of our kiddos were in preschool. Right. And I was just kind of struck with the kindness. Oh. You are such a kind person. Do people tell you that a lot?
Sometimes.
You're like, yes, they do. They tell me that all the time.
No. No, but it's very nice to hear it from you.
You're welcome. But yes, just such a gentle kindness, and then I got to know Elizabeth and I started to really understand the depth of that gentleness and kindness and just what a unique person you are. You are like one of those people that you'd see on the streets of New York and nobody would know that like they have 3 Oscar awards, on their fireplace mantle, because you have this rich and varied and very valuable history. And you are just such a humble person.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And, just so much to give and so much to teach. And I just have always, I hope this comes out the right way. I've always taken much more than I feel like I've given when we get together.
I think that's true. I think it's very mutual.
Well, thank you. I definitely learn so much from you when I'm with you.
Well, likewise.
Thank you, darling. Thank you. Well, let's get started with this interview. So when you read Elizabeth's story, it is such a unique, I would say, telling of a different life path than many of us take. So I'm going to just ask you, kind of tell our readers and our listeners a little bit about your history, and especially as it relates to your military history.
Okay. Well, I joined the military. I joined active duty in 2006. And I think we talked a little bit about how I initially wanted to join the Peace Corps. Mm-hmm. And when that didn't work out, I was like, well, I just sort of need to get out of here and do something. So that seemed like the fastest way to do that. Mm-hmm. So I joined active duty and sort of by and by was going through training and had the opportunity to try out for some different for explosive ordnance disposal school, which is like the bomb squad of the Army kind of. And so I just thought, well, what the heck, I'll go and, see how that is. And so I tried out for that. And then I was able to go to there's like a pre-qualification course. I was like, well, I guess I'll go to that and see how it goes. So I did that and that worked out. And so then I went at the actual real explosive ordnance disposal school at Eglin Air Force Base. And I was like, well, just do the best I can and see how this goes. It's a really difficult school with a very high attrition rate. So I was couldn't believe I had gotten into the school to begin with, and then was like, well, we'll just take it one day at a time. And then I ended up graduating with my class in 2008, in June of 2008, and got stationed out in Washington and deployed 3 times, twice to Iraq and once to Afghanistan. And then I finally left active duty and then moved back here to Sarasota and stayed in the Army Reserve at that point. So sort of my military background, I guess.
And we're going to talk more about that. But yeah, I love when you say I sort of left active duty, because you kind of stepped into a different line of active duty. Really?
Yeah.
Yeah. Talk
Yes,
about
you could
that.
say that. So, you mean about foster parents?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So then, my partner at the time and I became foster parents here in Florida, which was really a beautiful, um, incredible experience. Sort of highs and lows to it. A lot of, whenever you think you have like, you're like, oh, I've, seen a lot, I've got a lot of perspective here, something comes along and you're like, no, you just never really know. There's always more to learn about how other people are living their lives, I guess, and how,
Yeah.
there's always more, you can always broaden your perspective, I guess. That's maybe what I'm trying to say. And so it was an incredible experience, that we did together, and we went through together with, I think 14 kiddos over the period of a few years, and
Wow.
just met a lot of families, met a lot of people who work in the system, of course, in all different capacities, from therapists to social workers, and just learning, everyone, just sort of hearing about all their different struggles of people who work on the legal side of it. It was just really interesting to sort of see all the facets of how that system works, and to be able to work with the families to, get their, to restore their parental rights, and to, heal, to work towards healing as a unit, was just really an honor to be able to sort of be in the sidelines of that and part of the supporting cast of that. It was incredible.
Yeah. And you have adopted 3 children.
Yes, we adopted 3, and then soon I will be adopting a 4th on my own. So,
Congratulations.
yes, thank you. It's very exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Well, one of the things you share right at the beginning of your story, which feels like, listening to you talk today, and definitely when I've listened to you talk at other times, you had a mentor that gave you some pretty profound wisdom at a pretty young age. And she said, consider the source, the whole source, when you're looking at a person.
Right.
And, can you talk a little bit about how that has just informed your abilities for compassion and empathy, that perspective broadening that you just seem to be able to do so naturally within all of the capacities of your different lines of work and professional and personal relationships?
Yes, I mean, it was really the best advice, that anyone, I would say, I guess if I look back at what advice has really sort of shaped, the way that I've kind of gone through life. And like you're, saying that you experienced me as a kind person, I think comes from that I don't tend to approach people with judgment, because because I really did, for whatever reason. I mean, I respected her a lot. She's since passed away, but she was a very influential person in my life. And just, she was, at the time when I met her, I grew up, riding horses, and I was a working student at this farm in Germany. She was a young American woman who was living in this rural part of Germany that had, a lot of, very traditional values, and, experiencing her as like a New York City American, she got a lot of mixed, she had to deal with a lot, I guess you could say, in that role, in that town. And so, but she always said, because she always sort of handled it with a lot of grace. I felt, especially considering that most of my experience of her was this very outspoken, New Yorker, like, not a person who's just going to like sit back and take, whatever
what's coming at her.
And I don't think that she ever did. It wasn't that she, it was just that she did not allow any of it to get in, I think is what it was. And she didn't, and by that I mean, not only not allowing it to affect her opinion of herself, but not allowing it to affect just sort of her overall good nature. Like, I'm not going to push back at you in this way just because I'm not going to change who I am just because of what you're sort of throwing at me.
She kind of sounds like that Facebook quote or meme, never let someone else's unkindness compromise your ability to be kind.
Right.
Yeah,
I would say that she was just and so observing that, I really admired that. And that principle of considering the source seemed to be something that was very important to her. And that was the context that she first told me the story was, these people are, because a guy had said something, I don't even remember what it was in German anyway, that was not nice to her. And she said, he's an older gentleman, he's grown up in this little village his whole life, and his whole perspective on the world is very small and confined to what he knows from living in this very small village where there aren't, it wasn't a place where tourists come. So I mean, there really were not a lot of Americans that you would ever see there. And so she said, so that's just what it is. So for me to be angry at him for that would be sort of ridiculous, because, that's everything, there's a constellation of other things around that are, and that is the result of a lot of things that we don't have any control over.
Or sometimes like that we just don't know. I love that you use the word constellation, because it's kind of a nice dovetail into the constellation of your work today, because you're pursuing your master's in criminology, right?
Yes.
Yeah. With the hope to go on for the PhD.
Yes.
And, and we talk about this in your story, that your hope is to take everything that you have done and experienced and sort of learned from, and start to change policy when it comes to our judicial system and our punitive systems.
Yes.
So that constellation, of what I would call trauma-informed care, and you and I both would probably use those words, but maybe you can explain to our readers and our listeners a little bit about what your sort of goal is with this master's degree, and the PhD that's coming, and what you really want to do.
Yeah, so I definitely want to work towards policy change in the justice system, especially juvenile justice. I think that's an area where we can make a lot of impact in people's lives. Where we do make a lot of impact, I think right now we make a lot of very negative impact through our justice system, which is very punitive. And, there's a whole history, you can consider the source of that. I think it is, paved with good intentions, that, instead of just, executing people or cutting their fingers off, we decided, well, we can punish people in other ways that aren't like going to deform, or, if you look way back at the history of it. But I think it's sort of, it's now we have enough science and enough knowledge of development that we know that, putting people, children whose brains are still forming in solitary confinement, for example, is going to traumatize them and create more problems than it could ever possibly solve. And that therapeutic interventions, that, behavior is, is an externalization of something that's happening inside of the person, whether it's a, something physiological, a chemical imbalance, or an actual developmental disorder, or pain from trauma. And that all of those things, that there are interventions that are directed at all of those things, and that providing those interventions rather than just putting someone in an adult style, jail and just locking the key is not, they're not going to sit in a cell and heal themselves at that. There's just going to be more harm done. And then they're going to, go out into society with more harm, with even greater triggers for all of those externalizing behaviors. And in fact, we know statistically that prior confinement, so when a juvenile serves time in a detention facility, is a greater predictor of that child committing crime as an adult, even than being a member of a gang.
Wow.
So it's it's a very high rate of reoffending if a child is confined. So if you were going to use confinement if you're going to use recidivism as a measure of whether or not confinement is effective, you would have to, there would never be a policy that anybody would support funding if you said this will fail 80% of the time. Only 20% of these people won't go on to reoffend, and never mind that many of those people may have been wrongfully convicted in the first place. So I don't know why we do that with juvenile detention. It does not work. And it's really just something that's sort of built into the framework, I think, of our society. And we don't believe that there are other, most people don't think about that there are other options because it's always the way we've done it. But it's not effective, and it doesn't make communities safer. It doesn't rehabilitate, and it doesn't restore anything to the people who were the victims of the crimes that the children are incarcerated for.
Listening to you talk, I get that sense of those old attachment theory videos, of John Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth doing, I can't remember if it was both of them that did this, this research project, but I know you've seen it, where the monkey will choose the sort of, like the wire framed, mother that's like soft with like a sock over it, over food. Right. The baby monkey will, because and I'm probably misquoting it, but you guys get what I'm saying. The nuances of the project anyway, but you get what I'm saying. It's like we crave relationships like we do oxygen. This brain cannot develop without them, right? Functional relationships, and that we will crave softness and comfort over nutrition, right? That becomes our nutrition. And thinking about, like you said, that example of putting a child in solitary confinement, that disconnect is so painful. The brain is wounded, not beyond repair, but the brain is wounded so badly, and then you've got this opposite side of the gang that we don't hear as much about that as we used to, but thinking about the reasons why we know children and adults are prone to want to be within that atmosphere is that it's the false sense of family, the false sense of connection.
Absolutely.
So it makes perfect sense to hear what you say, that there's going to be a greater percentage of recidivism when a child experiences solitary confinement or any type of confinement than even gang involvement. Wow. Yeah. And this stops with you.
Well, it stops with,
yes, it does.
With all of us. Hopefully.
Yes, it does, baby. You're going to inspire so many people.
Well, there are a lot of great people working towards this, and there's a lot of research coming out now, and it's really encouraging to see it enter more the mainstream. I think all of these theories and all of this knowledge existed and was sort of considered to be on the fringe. But I think, mass incarceration has received a lot of more mainstream attention. There have been some great books written about the harm that does to communities. And I really don't think much more of adult confinement than I think of confinement of children. But I think if you have to start somewhere, I think that's where the greatest impact, one of the greatest layers of impact when you think, longitudinally, because we're basically, when we confine people, creating future offenders. We're doing, not only is the brain being traumatized but it's being traumatized at a time when it's also trying to develop. I mean, your prefrontal cortex, which is where your decision making occurs, doesn't, for most people, isn't fully formed until sometime in your mid 20s. So, you know,
Yeah.
it's significant.
Right. And that sense of connection of being part of a community, right, as we're talking about, and I know as you believe, goes more to restore and rehabilitate and transform than any type of surgically cutting someone away from those feelings.
Right.
Right.
Absolutely.
And this kind of gives us a nice intro into talking about your time when you were deployed. You talk about two really specific times, one when you were in Iraq and one when you were in Afghanistan in your story. And let's talk about the first one in Basra, because that's sort of that's the inspiration for your oracle card. So can you tell us a little bit about that moment in Basra of connection that you felt?
Yes, and I was so delighted to see that that was on the card, because I always thought if I was an artist, that is something that I would
You
draw.
even talk about that.
Yes,
Yeah. You
I
talked
wish
about that
I
in
had
your
a
interview.
picture or a painting
Yeah.
of that. But yeah, so I had the opportunity to work with a women's group in Basra. So it was local Basrawi women who came to a conference room at the airport, and we would basically have like a coffee hour and talk about all kinds of things. A lot of them were interested in getting involved in local government. So this was mostly driven by the Department of State, but they invited some military personnel to participate. And since I was the partnership chief, that was how I was fortunate enough to be involved. And it was really just a time of cultural sharing. It was incredibly, I mean, it was really incredible because it was all women, and it was really the only time I had over there when it was just all women, and we would just, it was so authentic, and we would just laugh and, drink tea and coffee and just talk about all, they wanted the opportunity to work on their English language. And so we would just talk about all kinds of things. And so one of the women one day asked if any of us knew how to do yoga. She had seen something about yoga on Oprah. And so a couple of us said that, yes, we love to do yoga. And so we, the women, it was actually during, I believe it maybe was even during Ramadan, when it was in the summer, and it was very hot. They were all wearing the full hijab, and were fully covered, and we were in our, the military people were all in our full uniforms, and so even though it was air conditioned, it was quite hot. And anyway, we started out doing some poses, and the last pose we did was Warrior One, and we all had our arms extended. And we were standing in a very close circle. Even though it was a big room, I think we all just felt like we were all just naturally, like, it wasn't awkward. We were just all physically very close to each other, like we're sitting here. And so when everyone extended their arms out, all of our hands were touching in the center. And it was just a really beautiful moment of just, we were all smiling, and it was just, it was sisterhood. It was just a sisterhood, and it was really one of the most meaningful things, I think, of any of my deployments. And when I look back at something really positive that happened, that was really incredible.
Yeah, I love that story. And I also love how it just validates what you've said so far, that we've got to open our perspectives, broaden our perspectives, broaden our horizons, or what my daughter says, I'm going to heighten my horizons.
Right.
That's what she said. I was like, what did you say? Broaden your horizons? Yeah, heighten my horizons, Mom. We've got to broaden our horizons and just realize we don't know what it's like to be anybody else.
Right.
And releasing that judgment. And, you even said that moment that we were doing your interview, that time just seemed to stop.
Yes.
And that you are all just women, you're human beings just coming together to connect. And I feel like listening to you talk today, I just feel this resurgence of energy around that we all have these capabilities, and we've got to connect with one another. And we are in really unprecedented times right now.
Mhm.
And if we can come together just with the energy to be open and to be
Mhm.
empathic, so much beautiful stuff can happen.
Yes,
Mhm.
I agree, and it's funny you mentioned that because I was thinking, driving here, especially as we near the election, that is like a very prominent narrative that, and we are in unprecedented times, and to the extent, in my humble opinion, that there's, every day is anew, and so everything arguably is in some way has never happened before.
Mhm.
But humans have always, throughout history, we've had differences, we've had conflict, there's been progress, incredible progress, incredible regress there, all, and I think connecting through our shared humanity has gotten us this far. And I think, um, I just try not to be too despairing, because fundamentally we are all still, after November 3rd, all the people who are humans will still be, we will all have a shared humanity, and we
Mhm.
will all have, the ability to reach across our differences, just like we have, no matter what happens on that day. I don't think um, we will all still have the power to make decisions for our little corner of the world, the neighborhood, to
Mhm.
reach out to our friends and to people who we agree with and who we disagree with, and share humanity, just like we did that day in Basra, with people who arguably couldn't have looked much more different
Mhm.
to the naked eye.
Right.
So I think it's possible.
Absolutely. And we'll kind of close on one of the things you said in your story. And I won't give real specifics about it because you can read Elizabeth's chapter, but it inspired one of the sacred place suggestions. And it was
Mhm.
during your time in Afghanistan, or no, I think it was even your first deployment, maybe. And you
Mhm.
stopped and just asked somebody, "Hey, are you okay?"
Oh, yes, that was, I believe that was in Afghanistan,
Was it?
actually. But yes, just the power of just connecting based on just our shared humanity
Hmm.
alone, that there's no, um, when I saw, I saw this, I was a fellow who I'd worked with, but we didn't know each other that well. He wasn't, someone in my unit, but I saw, we were in a headquarters building a lot at the same time, and I just saw him this day, and he just looked different than he had normally. His demeanor just looked different, and so I just, we had maybe spoken 6 times prior
Hmm.
to this, and so I just went up to him and I said, "Hey, are you okay?" And he just broke down crying,
Hmm.
and it turned out that his aunt had passed away. He had found out that day that his aunt had passed away, and his son was a really competitive athlete, and he was missing his a competition that that was going to be a big deal for him, and so um, he was just having a really hard day, and so that ability to just connect was, hopefully gave him the opportunity to, let some of that out, and to, you know, move forward. And I think we can give that to each other, with, despite any other differences.
Absolutely. I mean, kind of listening to you talk just inspires me to say to anybody who watches this, just maybe set the intention to just ask when you get that gut feeling like you did that day that he looked different. You didn't know
Hmm.
what was different, but you just sensed something was different. I mean, we
Hmm.
come across people every day, all day long.
Hmm.
And just if you get that little, message from your heart or from your gut to just say, "Hey, are you okay?" Because it really
Mhm.
goes a long way, doesn't it?
Yeah,
Mhm.
it does. And it's, I think, what connects us, at the center of our humanity, like we can think again about the constellation. I think there may be a lot of other life experiences and background that may lead us to have views that are in opposition to each other, or that we find, offensive mutually, or, whatever the case may be, but that we still share that center of humanity. And that's what's held us all together,
Mhm.
and what will continue to.
One of the things that you so beautifully say at the end of your story is you say, hey, we don't all have to disagree. Like
Mhm.
we're allowed to not agree with people on things, right?
Right,
I mean, because
for
we're
sure.
never going to find somebody that
Right,
we agree with everything
right. And
100%.
that's the richness
Hmm.
of
Us.
civilization, is
Yeah.
that it's sort of, if everybody is redundant, then then nobody's really necessary. We need all of that. We need to be able to come together and disagree about things, so that we can figure out the best way, forward,
Right.
because we need our beliefs to be challenged, I think, in order to, it's like a grindstone sharpening a
Mhm.
knife, or something, or polishing a stone,
You give a beautiful, beautiful thing to think about there. Where, whose beliefs are they? Where do your beliefs really come from? Are they yours? Can you sharpen that grindstone?
right.
Or can you sharpen that knife on the grindstone and get it to the point where you are just completely sure that these are authentically your beliefs? Or is it time to maybe pick up a new utensil?
Right. And that's really, I mean, because none of us, that's the other thing, is being open to the idea that my beliefs might be wrong. I might
Mhm.
be wrong about a lot of things. And if I'm not open to that, then I will not be able to progress.
Mhm.
And that's, one of, I read a lot of, I like classical literature, and my favorite line is in one of T.S. Eliot's four quartets, that says, "The only wisdom is humility, and
Mm.
humility is endless." And so I try to
Yeah.
just breathe in and remember that, especially in times of, you know, conflict or disagreement with other people, is that really the only wisdom is humility.
Mhm. Mhm. You're so right. And the fact that it is endless, it doesn't cost anything.
Right.
We're never going to run out
you
of
never,
it,
you
you
never
know.
run out of it. If you can tap into it, you'll
Mhm.
never run out of it. And you'll
Mhm.
never run out of, being able to learn things, or, like we talked about, broaden horizons, broaden perspective. Um, there's
Compassion and empathy,
so
right?
much, yes,
Yeah.
so much growth we can all do every
Yeah.
day. Yeah.
If we can just, like your mentor said, consider the source, always
Hmm.
consider the whole source. Just like you said, broaden
Hmm.
your perspectives, release that judgment, really
Hmm.
trust in your gut on connecting to people, and just knowing that we don't have to agree and we don't have to be aggressive around that disagreement. Like, we are
Right.
allowed to disagree if we can
Hmm.
just come forth with the energy to, or the intention to listen.
Exactly.
What kind of world would this be, right?
Yes, I
Which
agree.
is what our project's about, right? We really
Hmm.
just want to be able to share our stories in a way
Yes.
that everyone it feels seen and validated and heard, knowing that we're always going to be more alike than we are different. And
Hmm.
it doesn't matter what we look like
Hmm.
or where we've been or where we're going. It's about what's in here.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Well, thank you
Oh,
so
oh,
much
thank
for
you.
doing
Thank
this
you.
video today. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
all the beautiful work you are doing in your master's program. And I
Mm.
know that this world is just so lucky to have you, and everything that you're going to
Gosh.
change going forward to just bring about
Mm.
that sense of empathy and compassion, and just
Mm.
asking people gently, humbly, open your, or broaden your perspectives, open your heart.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for everything that you're doing, and
you're welcome.
putting all these beautiful stories together. It's really incredible project. So I'm
Thank you,
really
sweetheart.
honored to be a part of it.
Ah, well, namaste, my love.
Namaste.
That goes
Namaste.
both ways. Namaste. And thank you for watching. If you want to see more about Elizabeth or any of our Soul to Sisterhood sister goddesses, go to the website, www.soul-to-sisterhood.com. If you're on the website and watching this video here, be sure to look around. There's always going to be new content. And thank you all so much. And I just can't wait for us to keep making this world a better place, because you know what? We're all worth it, aren't we?
We are.
That's right.
True.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.